Law investor clients and investors in the Chicagoland area. Today I've got my personal golf coach actually now. Dan and I have gone golfing a couple times. Great guy. When I first met Dan, I did not realize, even though I'm the number one investment attorney in the Chicagoland area, I did not realize that a large publicly traded, probably the largest insurance company in the United States, State Farm, actually can provide insurance coverage for my investor clients. And Dan is actually the number one State Farm agent for rental properties in the United States. Now, why is talking about insuring investment properties so important? Well, what Dan uncovered for me is, and we're going to dive deep into this, is that my investors are actually losing thousands and thousands of dollars annually by either over or under insuring their properties. And based on Dan's knowledge and knowledge of investors, and he represents a lot of Castle Law investor clients, he actually can save my clients thousands of dollars, making a huge difference on your return on investment. So, Dan, thanks for coming on and spending a few minutes with my clients today.
Thanks for having me.
So, Dan's right here in the Chicagoland area. Obviously, Dan's been doing this for quite some time. The only reason we know that is because if you look at his head, he doesn't have any hair. So he just hasn't just started recently. Actually, Dan also competed in a couple of, they were triathlons, right?
Ironmans, actually.
Ironmans, exactly. So you can tell that I don't know the difference between these two things because Gary Davidson has never done an Ironman. But this guy is incredible, all in on everything he does, and just provides extreme value to his clients. So just a little bit about Dan. He started his own agency in 2002. He specializes in rental properties and apartment buildings and other or any other investor type risks. He has over 10 employees that helps him. And literally, I just sent him a client a week or so ago, analyzing a 14-pack of properties. And what was the analysis on that, Dan? How much did you actually end up saving this investor client that I sent to you?
I think on that one there, it was upwards of about $4,000. It was a large enough amount of money where at first they didn't.
And then how do you go about, how can you save somebody that kind of money? What goes into it? What's different about Dan Mosca and State Farm, or what's different really about you that you can look at this stuff and help them save that kind of money?
So what we found is that knowing the business itself makes a huge difference, and knowing what the investors are trying to do. It helps us do what's best for our clients. So in most cases, what happens is people insure their rental properties as if they're insuring their own homes. If you have one property that you live in and you have a median income, of course you're going to want to have a smaller deductible because you might not be able to come up with a larger amount of money. But if you've got 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 properties, you can spread that deductible risk out. So instead of having 1,000, you go to 5. You save $200 to $300 per property. You multiply that by, and that becomes real dollars. In essence, you're self-insuring yourself. The odds of having a loss on multiple properties in one tranche of business is very, very slim.
So you actually done the analysis, obviously with representing thousands of investors. You've seen where by doing this analysis, you understand that there's a certain sweet spot for the deductible whereby you can effectively make sure that someone is not either underinsuring their property, so they're minimizing their risk, or overinsuring their property such that you can maximize their return is kind of what I'm hearing. Now, what goes into your analysis when you look at this stuff? Dive a little deeper on explain to me why let's say I have a roof claim at 123 Illinois Street. How does that spread out amongst the properties? Maybe I'm not understanding.
So, real quick, going back to the overinsured, majority of those are overinsured, not underinsured. I just put that as the under, so you have that as well. But going back to your question, so a roof claim. So let's say you've got 10 properties, all right, and the cost to insure each one of those properties is $1,000 a year. And these are very high numbers that are not realistic, just so I can do the math pulling on a calculator. So you're spending $10,000 a year on insurance, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you've got $1,000 deductibles on each one of those properties. Well, if we look at making that deductible, let's say $3,000, and the premium goes from $1,000 a year to $500 a year, you now have saved yourself $5,000 a year. You've self-insured for that deductible of $3,000 on one property, and you have $2,000 in your bank now, which is now increased cash flow.
That's incredible. So basically, there's a certain break-even point because you've got that savings every year on an annualized basis, such
Exactly.
that you're playing the odds, and it's based on your experience and being able to look at thousands and thousands of investment properties of, how many times in a lifetime of someone owning a property are they going to have that roof claim? And if you take the total savings versus what they're going to pay in that deductible, in most cases, what you're telling me is that investor is going to come out way ahead by actually offering that, by actually choosing that deductible and saving them that money.
Oh, absolutely. I can't even think of a time. I have yet to have an investor in over 10 years of doing large amounts of properties that has lost on this. It becomes a little risky when you've got one or two properties, but I work with the individual investor and talk about that, and they can decide what risk they're willing to take on. But you start getting upwards of 10, 15, 20. I've got a client right now that has well over 300 properties and that has had 2 claims in 7 years. So, the numbers, the more properties, the higher the deductible, the more savings, the greater the cash flow, and also making sure that each individual property is insured properly. And by that, I mean not over-insuring.
If this is not sinking in for the people that are listening, this is kind of why I try to associate myself with people who are people of high integrity, because what Dan is basically saying is he's not going to try to sell you an insurance policy that costs more money simply because he may or may not get a benefit out of that. He's literally looking out for your interests to ensure that you maximize your return. And when Castle Law and when we put people in front of people, we want our investors to make the most amount of money possible, because let's face it, you don't get a good return on your value on your money, you're not going to buy more properties, and you're not going to achieve that life you're looking to live, the legacy you're looking to leave. So that's really cool. Now, Dan, again, just tell me a little bit more about, let's do another fact pattern. If there was, this last guy, how many properties was that, and how much you said you saved him a total of $4,000?
Yeah, I think it was 14 properties and approximately $4,000.
Okay, so for the average investor that comes to you, what kind of savings do they usually? Is it like? Do they usually save 20%, 30%? I know it's kind of hit or miss, but
percentages are kind of tough, like you said, because of the depending upon the size of the account. It's usually about $100 to $150 per property, depending upon the property itself. Sometimes it can be as high as 3 per property, and where they're at now, of course. In some cases, we've seen where people are grossly underinsured or overinsured. They've got very low deductibles, and they're beating up the taxes. They're trying to cash flow by taking it to the government. but yet they're giving away $75, $80 a month just on the insurance side of it. And I know to a lot of people, $50, $25 doesn't sound like a month, but to an investor in cash flow, that could be the difference between profit and loss, depending upon that year and what happens.
And I'm guessing that people can call you and you can give them an assessment of all their properties, and there's no cost associated with that. If you can save them money, they can become your client. But there's no cost in you quoting any sort of insurance coverage, right?
No, not at all. And when we quote, what we do is, going back to that client we talked about from a couple weeks ago. He gave me the list of properties. I quoted them up. We had those quoted up for him in less than a day of them. And by that, I mean, we're figuring out what the replacement cost is to build that structure, what it is to rebuild that structure, where it sits. So in some cases, he may have had it insured for $180,000, and we're showing a replacement cost of $140,000. Well, if there's a total loss on that property, he's not getting $180,000, he's getting $140,000. So we do a complete and total replacement cost analysis on every single unit that we insure.
That's
or a quote for that matter.
That's amazing. I don't know if people realize this, but obviously Dan does more than rental properties. Last week when I was out getting my weekly golf lesson from Dan, I was telling him about this car accident that I was in a little less than a year ago, and that I had just gotten my car back from the mechanic, and the air conditioning in the back was not working. Now, they had to take all the side panels off of the vehicle when they repaired it, and best my mechanic can tell, he thinks that a wire got crimped or something was dislodged, causing this air conditioning to not work in the back of the car. Now, most times when we have insurance agents, we're going to call the insurance agent. They're going to tell us to call the national office. We get some person who doesn't really care about their relationship with me, and it's kind of like the MasterCard commercial, and they say no. Dan said, hey, did you realize there's a lifetime warranty on some of this work? Let me call the place who did your vehicle repair. Let me get on the phone. Let me see if I can get them to take your car back. He did that for me on Monday. That collision place called me, said, bring in your vehicle. So, this individualized attention that I see from Dan and his staff in his office is something that I have never, ever seen in the insurance industry. So Dan, thanks a lot. That's really, really, really cool.
No problem. I was glad I was able to do that. I'm glad it worked out.
So when you look at tailoring an insurance system to people's individual or investors' needs, what goes into it to come up with your exact numbers? I know with the savings of $4,000 on this 14-pack of properties, I mean, I'm assuming that you could have had that savings be $500, $2,000, $4,000 based on the amount of coverage. How do you do that analysis, and what goes into it?
So basically, when it comes to the tailoring the investor needs, we take some assumptions into account. And one is that investors want cash flow. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? So we go into it knowing that the cash flow is what's primary. Coverage is just as equal, making sure that there's no risk out there that's going to leave their investment at risk. So when I say tailoring their needs, we take that for granted that they're looking for that, and that's what we do. When it talks about the tailoring of an insurance system or a program, there are some investors that start with 1, 2, 5, 10 properties, 20, and then the next thing you know, they've got 50 or 100. And there's a gap there between the managing of that insurance process. So I'll give you an example. I've got one investor who's got well upwards of 600 properties who, we create a spreadsheet for every month because he's constantly buying in and out of his properties. And we color code it. So it's highlighted green if he's selling or if he bought a property, highlighted red if it's out of the book and the date. And then if there's a change in premium for any reason whatsoever, we highlight it yellow. So it makes it easier for that investor to manage the insurance side of it. Our goal is to make sure that at the end of the day, when one investor talks to another investor, and inevitably things come up like property taxes and insurance, that the investor that we're insuring says, you got to call my guy because he's going to take care of you. And by that, I mean, we've had it happen where other State Farm agents have had properties that clients have wanted to move to us because of the way we manage them differently and maximize that profit.
And I can personally attest to that because I'm in the process of moving all of my stuff over to you, Dan, and I really appreciate that. Guys, this is not, cash flow is the name of the investment game. If you're not making money, then you're not playing the game properly. Additionally, the cash flow is great, but when you go to sell these properties, every person who's going to buy an investment property is going to be looking at cap rates, is going to be looking at the ROI. So if you don't have your insurance component in line with what is a reasonable amount, those are going to throw all your numbers off, and you're going to be selling these properties for far less because it's not showing the return that it shows. So I'm assuming, Dan, that you can, you help clients with this and provide that information so that when they are going to sell these properties, they can show what type of cash flow is on these properties.
It's funny you say that. In a lot of cases, we end up reinsuring them with the new investor. So it actually works in, both ways there as well.
So 20 years I've been doing this. I've constantly, for my own personal properties and for other clients, referred these national commercial brokers that not the State Farms of the world, because I didn't realize this product existed, and I didn't realize this type of service existed. This is a breakthrough situation for my clients in working with Dan. So Dan, you currently insure over 3,000 rental properties. How many investor clients would you say you have?
Probably upwards of 350.
So 350 investor clients. So I'm guessing that in addition to just your knowledge of insurance, you've really got a good handle to help guide your customers, just offering them advice on rental properties in general from time to time.
Absolutely. In some cases, I primarily work in Illinois and Indiana. Those are where I'm licensed, the states that I'm licensed, and I've got investors that have properties in other states as well. And what I'll do is when they call me, I will find them an agent in that state, explain to them how to write the product and what we're looking to do, and get them set up with that other state as well. I do that just for my investors.
And I want to make sure people understand. And yes, I'm shamelessly self-promoting Dan. However, this product is offered by State Farm, yet just like real estate attorneys, there's lots of real estate attorneys, but very few know investment real estate. For those wholesalers that are listening, I think you can attest to that. It's the same thing when it comes to your insurance agent. So if you just have, and I can say this, Dan probably can't, if you currently have your properties insured with State Farm, to go to your State Farm agent and say, hey, can you look at my insurance and can you save me money? I mean, if they're not getting out in front of this and doing this for you, you have the wrong agent. So call Dan. Don't delay. You need to call Dan, see what he can save you money on. So how do our clients, what's the best way to get in touch with Dan Mosca?
Real quick, one thing also is that, there are people that have relationships with their State Farm agents. And in some cases, it's not that they don't want to give that client the discounts or the service that they provide. They don't know the industry. So in the event that one of your investors or one of your people call me that has a State Farm agent that they're comfortable with the relationship with, I'll walk that State Farm agent through it as well. I don't have to have it all. because that isn't what it's about. What it's about is doing what's right for the investor, for you, and overall. So don't think that they'd have to switch to me. I'll help them through that process with the agent they currently have if they're already insured with someone else they have a relationship with.
And that's a really good point. And we'll do that same thing here at Castle Law. Sometimes people will have an attorney that just don't understand investment real estate, or don't know what a contract for deed is, or don't know how to wholesale a property, and we're all willing to offer that. So I appreciate that. So Dan, best way to get a hold of you?
You can call my office. You can call my cell phone. If you call the office and you find that I'm not there, I know that Gary and I talk about golf a lot, and odds are if I'm not at the office, I'm not on the golf course. I personally inspect every single property that I insure. So there are 3 to 3.5 days a week where I'm putting well over 200 miles a day on my car, driving from property to property to property to property, helping my investors understand if there are issues or not. Also taking photos. So my cell phone is also a great way to contact me as well. Email, however, whatever's easier for them is fine.
So guys, get a hold of Dan. Doesn't cost you any money. Have him do an analysis of your properties. Use this resource. See if he can save you some money. Let him talk to your State Farm agent if it is a State Farm agent. But get a hold of Dan and see what kind of additional funds that we can put in your pocket today by changing your insurance format. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for coming on. Good to see you. Hopefully next time I can hit the ball a little straighter than we were the last time we were out on the course.
Well, last time we played. Thanks for having me. I do appreciate it. Looking forward to hearing from you all soon.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Take care.